Stop talking about your trauma. Now, I know that sounds like unexpected advice, especially coming from a psychotherapist. But in this video, I'm going to share 3 reasons why talking about your trauma probably isn't healing you, and how it may even be holding you back, and how you can actually heal from trauma without needing to talk about it at all, including without a therapist. Check the link in the description in the comments below if you'd like to try self-administered trauma healing. Now, here's the first reason why you shouldn't talk about your trauma, which can be quite surprising. Reason number 1. Sometimes when someone goes through something painful, a difficult childhood, a toxic relationship, or a loss, they start sharing it, which is understandable. But then it becomes all they talk about to the same people over and over again. And here's what happens. Even the people who love you the most have a finite emotional capacity. There's actually a name for what happens to them, and it's called compassion fatigue. And it's where someone hits the wall, basically. They don't usually tell you though, they just start pulling away. They reply slower, they make excuses, they go quiet. And then the person sharing the trauma wonders, why is everyone abandoning me? Well, actually, they've been inadvertently pushing people away. This is sometimes called trauma dumping, and it's far more common than people realize. You don't mean to do it, but the impact on your relationships can be severe, and it leaves you feeling more alone, not less. Now, I do encourage you to share your trauma with a trained mental health professional, your doctor, but even then, you need to be careful talking about your trauma, even with us professionals, because of this really next important reason. Reason number 2. Now, this one might surprise you. There's a widespread assumption that talking about something painful will, over time, make it hurt less. And in the right therapeutic context, that may be true. But here's what the research actually tells us. Re-narrating a traumatic event without the right support structure doesn't heal the nervous system. It could, in fact, deepen the wound and worsen the symptoms of PTSD. Every time you retell the story, especially to someone who doesn't know how to hold it or structure it safely, your body re-experiences the threat response, the cortisol spike, the heart rate increase, the dysregulation. You're not healing the trauma, you're just simply rehearsing it. Now, I had a client, we'll call him John, and who once suffered a major trauma and had PTSD from it. Now, John saw an NHS psychiatrist, and annoyingly, this psychiatrist was clearly not trauma-informed, because when he saw the psychiatrist, they asked John, "So tell me, what exactly happened?" Naturally, John was reforced to tell his story, and soon enough, he was having a major panic attack, and he was so activated, he literally ran out of the room crying. Had this psychiatrist been trauma-informed, they would not have asked John such an invasive question, because getting people to talk about major trauma can be incredibly reactivating and re-traumatizing. Now, the question is, can you heal trauma without talking about it? Well, the answer may surprise you, which I'll share in a moment. But there's one more important reason I want to tell you about why you should stop talking about your trauma. Reason number 3. Now, I want to be very careful here, because I'm not saying your pain isn't real. It absolutely is. But there's something important happening neurologically when we repeatedly tell the story of what happened to us. The brain is a learning machine that learns through reinforcement. The more you narrate yourself as a victim of your trauma, the more your neural pathways lock that identity into place. It becomes your primary lens for interpreting everything, your relationships, your future, your sense of what's possible for you. This isn't weakness, it's neuroscience. And it's one of the most under-discussed reasons why people can remain stuck for years, even when they want to move forward. Have you noticed that the more you talk about something bad that happened to you, the bigger and more defining it starts to feel? That's not a coincidence. Trauma healing, real trauma healing, involves building a new narrative or a new relationship with the trauma. It's not about erasing the past, but it's about no longer living there. And if you keep talking about the trauma repeatedly, however, that does not build a new relationship with the trauma. As one clinical supervisor told me, when it comes to talking about past trauma, look back, but don't stare. And talking about trauma often is the equivalent of staring intently at the rearview mirror, never looking forward. So you might be wondering, if talking about my trauma doesn't heal it, then what will? Well, there are 3 scientifically backed trauma therapy approaches, and the first and the third one you might have never heard about before. Trauma healing method number 1. The first is IFS, or Internal Family Systems, developed by Dr. Richard Schwartz. So IFS is based on the idea that your mind isn't a single unified self. It's more like an inner family of parts. It's a bit like that Disney film, Inside Out, where each part has its own character and personality. When trauma happens, certain parts of you, what IFS calls exiles, carry the emotional burden of that experience, and other parts work over time to keep those exiles locked away because the pain feels too dangerous to feel. Does that sound familiar? What IFS therapy does is it helps you to access what Schwartz calls the self, which is a calm, curious, and compassionate core. And from that place, to gently approach the parts that are suffering. And it's not about talking about the trauma, but to actually go and meet it and to be present with it, to give those exiles what they never got. So you might attempt to release the traumatic burden using what's called an IFS unburdening, which is where the exile releases the emotional burden it's carrying. This can be very cathartic and healing. And the good news is you do not need to share what those parts are telling you with your therapist. And this process can be entirely non-verbal, or as what us therapists call non-voyeuristic, which means you don't need to share all the gory details with us therapists. But what if your trauma is lodged somewhere where words just can't reach it? But I have to warn you, when you hear about how this approach works, you might be quite surprised. Trauma healing method number 2. This next trauma healing approach is EMDR, also known as eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. When people first hear about EMDR, they're a bit skeptical. Moving your eyes to heal trauma? It sounds a bit strange, but the research is rock solid. It's endorsed by the World Health Organization and the NHS. So here's the theory. When a traumatic event happens, the memory can get frozen in the nervous system in an unprocessed state. It's why trauma memories often feel so vivid and present. They haven't been filed away like normal memories. EMDR uses something called bilateral stimulation, eye movements, taps and tones which go from left to right, back and forth, while you briefly hold the traumatic memory in mind. This may help to activate the right and left hemispheres of the brain, hence the phrase bilateral stimulation. This bilateral input allows the brain to do what it does during REM sleep, which is to process and integrate the memory so that it loses its emotional charge. The memory doesn't disappear, but it does stop hijacking you, and you may experience a reduction in the emotional charge of that memory. Again, this trauma healing method, when done right, could work without you even talking about depth in the trauma, because the healing is in the bilateral stimulation. But this third trauma healing method surprises people the most, including many trained doctors and psychiatrists, because unlike IFS and EMDR, it doesn't require you to revisit the traumatic memory in any real detail whatsoever. In fact, the less you say, the better it works. Trauma healing method number 3. This method is particularly close to my heart because it's part of my own training in human Givens Psychotherapy, and it's called the rewind technique. Here's why it's remarkable and why it connects directly back to this video's central idea. With the rewind technique, you do not have to talk about your trauma at all. In fact, that's rather the point. Using a deeply relaxed state, the therapist guides you to observe the traumatic memory from a position of complete dissociation. Imagine watching yourself watching a film of what happened, perhaps on an imaginary TV screen. And then that memory is rapidly rewound, like a film being fast forward and then rewound from end to beginning. This process desensitizes the emotional response to the memory without requiring you to relive it in great detail. And it can work in as little as 1 to 3 sessions for single incident trauma. It can also work for complex trauma too, in which case the imaginary film might contain various scenes of perhaps different traumatic memories. Now, believe it or not, some clients described leaving the session feeling like the memory simply no longer has a sting. So IFS, EMDR, the rewind technique, 3 very different approaches to trauma, but they share one thing in common. They all have supporting scientific evidence that they can work for healing trauma, and they go beyond just words. Real trauma healing isn't about finding better ways to describe your pain. It's about finally letting your nervous system release it and giving your brain the message that the trauma, it's over, it's done, you're safe now, you're no longer there, and building a new relationship with that trauma. Believe it or not, rewind and EMDR can be done by yourself and without a therapist. Now, I do strongly recommend you do them with a therapist, and that's the safest option. However, emerging research suggests that self-administered trauma healing can work. One study of self-administered trauma therapy via EMDR found that results indicated significantly reduced symptoms of PTSD, depression, anxiety, and distress, and that there were no serious adverse events reported. Of course, keep in mind that this research is still emerging, but this could be worth trying if you cannot work with a therapist or psychiatrist, perhaps for financial reasons or otherwise. If you want to give the self-rewind or self-EMDR a try, please check out the link in the description and comments below. And look, managing trauma and mental health can be really difficult by yourself, and that's why I'm also launching a free Discord chat server for my subscribers to give each other peer support, which you can access at the URL in the description and the comments below. Now, I might get some pushback for this video because it goes against a lot of what's out there right now. But as a psychotherapist, my job isn't to tell you what feels comfortable, it's to tell you what actually works. So I'm curious, did anything in this video surprise you? What's your opinion on non-verbal trauma healing? Please let me know in the comments below. Now, often what comes with trauma is anxiety, so please check out this video here on 5 anxiety tips no one tells you about. And remember, this video is not a replacement for psychiatric or medical diagnosis, treatment, or advice.